All right, what's up, YouTube? Ted Filson here again. We're going to do it a little differently today. My last few videos have been on a pretty specific topic, mostly Ubisoft. And I'm sitting here wondering to myself what I should do next, try and, keep my practice going, keep generating some YouTube videos. And I couldn't find a topic that I thought was really interesting enough to dive into and really do a deep dive on, nothing that was too complicated. So I figured let's just do a little bit of a rundown of the past month. There have been some headlines, some of which I've got some opinions on, some of which I think some corrections can be made and some criticisms can be made, but again, nothing too crazy. So let's do that. I'm going to run through some of the big stories. The first one, right off the bat, is Nintendo has raised its prices. They're now selling their games for 80 or 90 bucks, okay? And most of the people that I follow, most of the content creators that generally I really like and that I get my news from, they're all pretty anti this, which makes sense. Nobody wants the prices to go up. But a few things here to note. One is you can't really be based and still complain about this, right? If you're going to be based or you're going to be conservative and sort of like a free market type minded person, you can't say that, and complain at the same time about price increases, right? It's a little silly. Like the whole point is that supply and demand solves these problems. Prices are determined based on people bidding for goods and services that they wish to consume, and an informed market will reach price equilibrium, right? So, like, it's sort of a free market idea, and I get it. It's 90 bucks. Nobody wants the prices to go up. Literally nobody. I'm not glad the prices are going up. Nobody, none of the consumers are happy about it. And I don't think I mean, certainly, again, you've always got the IGNs and the Kotakus who are running cover, right? We know how that goes. I'm not trying to side with them, trying to cover it favorably. That's not what I'm doing. I do think it's interesting though. I think there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance there where people love and get excited to complain about these sort of things. And yet it's like, dude, this is free markets, right? This is how prices are determined. And, I mean, like inflation, come on, inflation's a thing. You could say it's a silly argument. I'm sure Nintendo's not using a CPI index to calculate their new prices, but like it's still a thing. Inflation has been insane the past few years all over the world. So, anyway, kind of interesting. Certainly a bit of a bummer, but I would also note all of the content, all of the sort of stories from sort of like independent games journalists, independent game, whether you want to call them influencers or content creators, whatever you want to call them. I think of them as journalists because I do get a lot of news from them. Again, this is Endymion or however you say it, Gamer Ranks, Bellular, Asmon, whoever you're watching, Ordinary Gamer. There's a lot of catastrophizing, like, oh, this is so bad for the industry. And I genuinely don't understand the logic. Like, yes, game price increase, that is bad news. Okay. I'm with you there. Nobody likes that. Not entirely with you on like, do they have the right? Should we like be cool about it? I don't know. Be cool about it. Like, buy the game or do not buy game. But so much of it, so much of the content is like, oh, this is bad for the industry. The industry's gonna die. It's like, I don't even understand that logic. Are you suggesting it's too high and therefore people will not buy the game? Well, if that happens, then Nintendo will either lose money and then lower the price or just lower the price. So by highlighting like the catastrophe of it and how it will actually backfire for the game studios, you're also sort of highlighting the fact that it's not actually a catastrophe for the consumer, you know? And again, I think it's just sort of like the internet infosphere. Like that's just how these things work. People just can't help but be dramatic about new news. And so it's kind of fun to try not to be dramatic and just look at it rationally. So anywho, that is sort of a bummer. Oh, last thing, no, last thing on this. Nintendo did make a statement. They've probably even made more at this point. But via IGN, the head of North America, Nintendo, did provide a statement and an explanation, and it was, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. His answer was, we don't think of it as a price increase. We simply look at our games and try and estimate the value they give to the consumer, and then we price them. And then we assign that dollar value. And honestly, it's it's just embarrassing. If anybody actually read that article and said, "Oh, well, that makes sense," then oh, it just hurts my stomach to think about. It is the dumbest argument they could have possibly made. I don't know why they don't just say, "Look, dev costs went up. We haven't raised prices in, since 1992. It's like, fair is fair. Like, we wanted to increase costs. Like, what are you going to do? Sorry. Like, maybe we'll try and lower them, or some games we're going to sell for under 90. Like, say whatever you want. But to say, like, no, 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 no. We didn't do math. We didn't, like, look at our expenses or look at inflation. We just looked at the game and we saw how dope Mario Kart World was going to be. And we just decided that was $90. We could just feel $90 coming off it. And it's just like that literally implies that they've sat around since 1990 debating the value of their mainline titles every single day, the value that they deliver to the consumer, and ultimately decided invariably that these games are worth $60. Like that's the implication. The implication is that they've been doing this since the beginning of time and have coincidentally for every single game ever since, again, I don't know, 1990s, and always coincidentally landed at $60. And it's just so painfully stupid that I can't believe IGN published it. I can't believe Nintendo thought that was a good idea. Really just silly, manipulative, gobbledygook. It really just hurts my brain to think about. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Certainly happy to criticize Nintendo on that one. Very, very stupid statement to make. Whether or not people like it, I can't say. I don't know how the average consumer digests, that sort of nugget. But to me, it just, feels like it's giving me cancer. All right. Um, all right, next up, here's a quick one. Bellular News actually did a good video on it, and I have no real criticism, no real caveats. There's not a very good finance angle for me to like get in there and root around, so I'm not even going to touch it. I'm going to link Bellular News's video in my section, and this is on a new ruling in the EU talking about new legislation going into effect that will impact currency and microtransactions in video games. And this is obviously something everybody should hate. Microtransactions and manipulative marketing practices and things like that. Those are all things people should hate. And this is pretty much generally good news. And Bellular did a good job covering it. And so yeah, go ahead and I would take a look at that. But that's headline worthy right there. I'd take that. I like that video. All right. Again, though, quick side note, kind of not a very based perspective, though, right? The consumers, people and video game consumers should try harder to not consume garbage rather than hoping federal governments around the world will step in to protect us from our own stupid decision making, right? Like, I am not generally, super like demanding the government create legislation to prevent me from making stupid decisions. Um, so while I do hate microtransactions, and this is probably a net win for society, it's important to keep that like frame of reference. When you celebrate legislation, you are also celebrating, the babysitter mentality of governments around the world that it's just not necessary. We could also vote with our dollars. We could also just not buy EA garbage, not buy loot boxes, teach our kids not to buy loot boxes, teach kids as responsible adults how to engage in economies and consumer economies specifically. So, anyway, that's a noteworthy headline. Bellular did a good job, and I would check out that video. Uh, Here's something that I have not heard anybody else say yet, and that is not haven't seen a video on it. There's a guy who gives me almost all of my FromSoft news. FromSoft being FromSoftware, they make, if you don't know, Elden Ring, the Armored Core series, all of the Dark Souls, Sekiro, Bloodborne, uh, That's pretty much it, right? But they, most people know they changed the game for action adventure games in a lot of ways. They are absolutely, since I've been a fan more or less since Dark Souls 2, it's kind of all I play at this point because so many other AAA games are just absolute trash. Um, so anyway, Ziostorm is where I get most of my FromSoft news, and he's covered all of this, but hasn't come to the same conclusion I have. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, and I'm just gonna call it out. I'm afraid FromSoft has died. They're mixed up with Katakawa, a parent company, which is a Japanese sort of conglomerate doing lots of things other than video games. Tencent is also in the mix with a little chunk of the equity, and their last three announcements are all sort of bad news. Okay, we have one, Night Rain. Guys, we all love Elden Ring. Night Rain is probably fun-ish, but what the shit is that? That's nobody was asking for it. Nobody was asking for it. I'm sorry. So that's a terrible indication. Multiplayer, it's basically Fortnite mixed with Elden Ring. You know, not great for consumers who just want awesome story, action, challenging, cool graphics, cool weapons, fun gameplay, right? Looping in or, piling on with some goofy Fortnite bullcrap should disappoint all FromSoft consumers. Two, Duskbloods. Duskbloods is apparently, and I don't know if I have my facts straight on this, but apparently a multiplayer game. Duskbloods isn't like the next in the mainline Dark Souls just going to Nintendo exclusive or like the next iteration of the Soulsborne formula. No, it's some new thing where they're reusing more assets than ever, and it's all multiplayer. I don't know what that means, but there's no way that's a good thing. There is 100% chance that is tied to profit motive, and they're looking to layer on, I hope not season passes, but microtransactions or something like that. So it doesn't look good. And then three, this new Elden Ring version for Nintendo Switch, which again is just leaning into this multiplayer stuff. So I think this all bodes very poorly for FromSoft. And I think I think it's just time we make peace with it. It happens to everything. They were the best. They were the golden child of the industry for years. They basically didn't miss. From Sekiro to Bloodborne to Dark Souls 3 through Elden Ring, they were just the most reliable. And that's why Elden Ring blew up so hard. But just like, I mean, think about any music, any band you like. They were awesome, and eventually they got too big and they sold out. Modest Mouse, we all know what the worst Modest Mouse album was, and people may be too young for Modest Mouse, but Good News is what I call it. And it's like, yeah, that's what Float On was on. That was their number one hit. It was an okay album, but they went downhill from there. That's just the way these things go. They get too big for their britches, and then they turn into Bethesda, right? Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim. They were all awesome. And I wasn't as into Fallout, but it seems Fallout 76 is where it really turned. On the Elder Scrolls side, it was ESO. That's when they died. They watered it down from Morrowind. They watered it down from Oblivion. And then, yeah, it peaked at Skyrim. Guys like me still say Morrowind was the best game because that's the most hardcore, but it sort of hit its inflection point and then just went downhill. And so that's what's going to happen to FromSoft. I'm calling it here. I love you, FromSoft. You made some amazing games, but I've lost faith. And we'll see what they come out with. The next one, Elden Ring might be their Skyrim. Maybe that sort of inflection point is yet to come, but I doubt it. I think Elden Ring is their good news for people who love bad news. It is their Skyrim. It is the climax that is just watered down enough to be massive appealing and yet still sick enough to be popular with hardcore people. And I'm pretty sure it's over. All right, next up. A lot of videos talking about Western versus Eastern developers. And the West has died and the Eastern devs are taking over. And I saw a few videos on this about just how, basically what I just said. The West is done, Eastern devs are winning, and there you go. And that's interesting in some way. And so I went through and I just made a list. I said, okay, what out of the past handful of years, what's been in the news, right? What's big time? Whether I've played it or not, what can the West claim and what can the East claim? So on the West, I got Baldur's Gate, Animal Well, Space Marines, Helldivers, basically any sports game, which I don't play, and I hate to even give credit for it, but they're in there, and the West wins. Assassin's Creed, question mark. God of War, question mark. But Kingdom Come Deliverance, PoE 2, Red Dead, maybe the new Harry Potter game counts. Maybe COD counts. I mean, some of these mixed in are like the problem with Western devs, like Assassin's Creed, maybe God of War, certainly Call of Duty, certainly the sports games. But nonetheless, these are pretty mainstream, and some of these games I've played and are at least fun enough. On the East, we've got Black Myth. That's what kicked off this debate, I think. Elden Ring, Stellar Blade, anything Zelda, the East gets. We've got Monster Hunter Wilds, pretty hot. And then, but then what? We've got a lot of Final Fantasy stuff. We've got the Yakuza stuff. We've got Power World. But I mean, Yakuza, Final Fantasy, I mean, so much of this stuff is just rehashed anyway. And Yakuza is just like so goofy. Like that, the Westerners don't even play that game anyway, right? Dragon's Dogma, meh. Like okay, Dragon Ball. I like Sparking Zero, but I couldn't after googling, just some basics and trying to jog my memory and like, okay, well, what were some of the biggest titles? I honestly just don't see it. What I do see is indie versus megacorp, right? I see Helldivers, Space Marines, Grinding Gears games, Larian with Baldur's Gate, Animal Well, which I think is just a solo dev. I think Arrowhead did PoE, right? I see smaller studios actually taking the risks and making decent games and getting actual like fan support, right? Versus the CODs and the sports games and the God of Wars and the Assassin's Creed that, even though they may be commercially successful, people don't seem to love. I see that as a much more interesting dichotomy. And yeah, anyway, I just don't see it. I mean, I'd like to see somebody create like a comprehensive list because also if you look on Steam, try and look at Steam data. So much of the stuff. I mean, one game that popped up a bunch was like Balatro Refantasio. Okay, never played it, but I just can't accept that. I can't accept that into the conversation. It's like it's a freaking poker game. When we're talking about like the game industry and what's driving the industry, you've got to try and bring it back to like the core of it, which is mostly these action adventure games. But like to loop in like successful puzzle games, successful deck builders, then we have to include the sports games too. We got to talk about the racing games, and it's just too fragmented. So I really think you got to stay on like, okay, we've got Elden Ring, we've got Black Myth, we've got Stellar Blade, and then compare that to the Space Marines, the Helldivers, the Baldur's Gates, the Kingdom Comes, the God of Wars, like, and really stack it up that way. And again, I just see a much more interesting dichotomy on indie versus megacorp and seeing, when do they go the way of Project CD Red, right? And which, by the way, is another perfect example of the FromSoft of the all good things come to an end, right? I don't even have to say it. When did they peak? It was Witcher 3. Cyberpunk, they went too far. They couldn't get their shit together. They got too corporate, right? They lost it. They lost the script. And I'm sorry, but they're dead forever. They're not coming back. There will never be another game like Witcher 3 unless it's produced maybe PoE 2. That'll be Arrowhead's version. They're going to peak, right? They all do. But we should absolutely give up. And honestly, GTA 6, where's that going to be? Is 5 the peak? Probably. 6 is probably not going to be what 5 was. And I don't know why. I don't know what it's going to be. Are they just going to get too woke and silly with their storylines? Are they going to try and cram the microtransactions down our throats too hard? Are they going to be too PC? Maybe not. And who knows? They might have, they might prove me wrong. But if you look at these things on a curve, GTA 5 was most likely the peak. Elden Ring was most likely the peak. So anyway, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thought it was an interesting, different way to go about it. Didn't want to try and make these super detailed videos about all these different topics, and I figured I'd just do a little bit of a recap, cover some of the biggest headlines, at least the ones that are important, rather than all of them, because there's a lot of videos that I watched over the past month that were just not that interesting and didn't cover things that seemed all that relevant and important. Um, and yeah, give a little bit of a rational take on it. So hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you guys soon.